Connecting. Hi, everyone. I am Stacy Hurt, Senior Advisor with OSP Labs, and I am your host today for our Healthcare Leadership Insights webinar, Establishing Technology as a Partner in Care. I am thrilled to have my guest today with me, my friend John Nosta. Let me tell you a little bit about John. He is the founder of Nosta Lab, which is a global think tank really about digital health and technology. John is a thought leader. He is a researcher, and he is an innovation theorist. He talks about the diffusion of innovation. He is self-described as bilingual in medicine and marketing. And to kick us off, I want to hear what that means, John. Tell me what that means, bilingual in medicine and marketing.
Sí, ahora quiero hablamos en solamente en español. Oh, sorry, that was the wrong bilingual. So here's the thing today, right? Everybody knows about one thing or the other. They tend to be domain specialists in the context of medicine, right? You know, they'll use interesting words like clinical trial or patient recruitment as the term of trade. That's the medical term of trade. That's the medicine side of business, or 1,6-fructose diphosphate, or troponin and tropomyosin, and all that kind of stuff. But on the other side of that game is the marketing people, are the consumers, and they have a really different life. And for me, the balance between understanding the science and articulating it in a way that is digestible, that we can sort of understand. You know, everybody makes mistakes. The biggest companies in the world fail. And we have to recognize that an idea or an innovation is only as good as the degree to which it's used. So, you know, that's really, for me, I mean, I spend a lot of time, Stacy, as you know, talking about innovations and particular innovations, but sometimes it's not as much about the innovation, but the ability to adapt and adopt that innovation into our life. So, you know, when we go into the whole marketing mumbo jumbo, most innovators, I know I'm going way off topic already, right? So can I keep talking?
I love it.
Okay. So, you know, most innovators, right? They make their widget. I don't even care what the widget is, right? And their marketing strategy is this: let's spend all our money on the widget, and then we got a little bit left over in the pot. And our marketing strategy is build it and they will come. Right? That's it. We'll make a really cool thing. And then the patients will come, or the doctors will come, or worse than that, we'll bypass the doctor and we'll go directly to the consumer because the consumer is empowered. Well, you know, that's a formula for failure. And that's what everybody does. They fail because they don't have a path to diffuse. And you and I, we know cell biology. Maybe it's not diffusion. You know, maybe it's not osmosis. Maybe it's active transport. It's actually pushing an ion across a membrane. So for me, it's that balance between understanding the science, really being able to know what the heck 1,6-fructose diphosphate really is, but then communicating in a way that is single-minded. And just to kind of punctuate this, most innovators, most people who are developing brands, and I'm going to say this, and I know I'm going to get in trouble already. Most people in pharmaceutical science and pharma bundle in the context of a bundle of benefits. They want to be safe, effective, well-tolerated, on formulary, all these things. Yeah. And that's Bob, bundle of benefit. Bob always comes to the party and he ruins it for everyone. But single-minded pointedness, single-minded positioning allows you to have a unique feature. And what comes from that unique feature is not the idea that I will buy your product, but it comes the idea of tell me more. And that's what the advertising really has to be. It has to be tell me more, and then get me to the website, get me to the sales rep engagement, all that kind of stuff. So that's what I kind of focus on.
No, I love it. And you know, I was just, you know, we got to meet in Boston at CNS Summit, and I think this was something that, you know, point really bonded on, and that is, as you said, John, you know, and I work with patients in advocacy, you can have the best plan ever, but if the patient doesn't understand that plan, it doesn't make sense to them, it isn't in language that is meaningful to them, they're not going to carry it out, right? I mean, they're not going to do it. So, like you
not
said,
only are they not going to do it, right?
Mhm.
They're not going to understand it. So right from the get-go, they will be confused. And here's the ultimate tragedy, I think, is that when we have a tear sheet on a drug, you get a new med or you get a procedure, and the nurse comes in and gives you that sheet of paper that was printed by the pharmaceutical company, the things you should be worried about after your infusion or whatever it is, right? Those those are mandated to be written on a 5th grade level. Okay. Now, no one who gets that drug or that intervention is in 5th grade. Some are engineers and may enjoy seeing a chart or a graph. Some are moms who are more concerned about taking care of their kids or managing the household, and they might want it expressed in language that is more relevant to their lifestyle. So what we do is by going for the middle, we miss everyone. So, we live in this sea of ambiguity, and we expect people to follow instructions when the instructions are pandering to this neutered middle ground. And, we live in the world of computers. Websites are optimized. I think it should be absolutely, completely automatic that when we have a set of instructions for, let's say, a pharma product, those should be tailored to you. So if you're highly educated, but it's easy to do. I mean, there are probably 4 or 5 versions of any given patient instructions that would cover 90% of the market, except we live in the world of 5th grade. So.
No, I couldn't. We could be doing so much more to be personalized and customized.
But easy stuff, Tracy, Stacey, it's not even innovation. It's just implementation. It's the other I word. It's not even new. It's just using the existing technology.
Being smarter. Well, that's great segue to jump into our discussion. And to our audience today, I want to thank you for joining us. John and I are going to talk hopefully for 45 minutes. We may go longer. We're going to try to get to your questions. Please drop us some questions in the chat. And like I said, we're going to try to get to them at the end, but we have so much to talk about. John, I'm going to start with, technology is obviously a major component of the health sector. It's what everybody's talking about. Can you share your opinions on this and how your company, Nosta Labs, is helping deliver quality care to patients?
That's such a broad, abstract question. So, I mean, to me, we're trying to connect the value of technology, with the need in the system. People are afraid of technology.
Yes.
I find it that it's, and to me, I think that technology enhances our humanity. And we can talk more about that a little bit later, but for me, I think the essence is that the technology is out of the technology toothpaste is out of the tube, and that we kind of have to understand it and adapt it into our lifestyle. So for me, that's what Nosta Lab does. It takes a sort of a philosophical approach at helping people understand how technology fits into their lives, into their clinical practice, and helping them follow that path, because it's the fear that is one of the biggest impediments towards technological adoption.
Well, I mean, again, working with patients all the time, there's a ton of fear out there. I was just on an advocacy group call the other day, and there was a patient, she's battling stage 4 cancer, breast cancer, and she's out in California. And she said, they just want to hook me up to a bunch of these devices. They want to attach them to me. I'm a data farm, and they just want to send me on my way. They don't care about me. They just want to hook me up to all this stuff and take the information. And then, so there's people like you and me that are looking at the flip side of that, and looking at remote patient monitoring and capturing all this information between a visit. And here's a patient, as you said, that is fearful and feels alienated and feels just like a product of the system, because she's hooked up to all these things. And I mean, I think that's a serious fear, like you said, that we need to overcome. Why do you think that fear exists, or more so, how can we get past that? What do you think is the key thing that we need to do to help to help patients adopt the technology, to feel better about it. Not that it's a foe, but it's a friend.
Most people are educated on technology by Hollywood. That's the interesting reality, that the world we live in is about Star Trek and the tricorder and, and more contemporary dystopian visions of the world as being driven by the horror of technology that will dominate humanity. I mean, the reality is that's kind of the vision, the futuristic vision that a lot of people have in their head. Yeah. And for me, the reality is that you have to become educated, that you have to understand that this provides a unique benefit, that this is a path forward. So the problem is that we don't have time in the clinical construct to educate people on the functionality of telemedicine, or how good it is, how easy it is. We actually push them right into the use. We did. And that, in a way, that's kind of a good thing, because when you try it, you realize that actually this is pretty good. I don't have to drive 75 miles to my oncologist to pick up my meds for a clinical trial. I can get them, through another process. So, jumping right in is probably pretty good for me. But, it's the fear of the unknown. And, it's one thing when I'm buying a new car and I'm like, should I buy an electric car? Or should I stay with that gas engine? I know it works. I know my mechanic. He's a really good friend of mine, and I've been with that mechanic for a long time, and I trust his or her judgment. Now I'm going to go to an electric car, and where am I going to get it serviced? And how am I going to manage? Now that's medicine. That's exactly medicine, right? Do I go to a new doctor? Do I try a new modality? Do I switch to this kind of process, which may be more technologically driven? It's the fear of the unknowing. Yeah. And I think that it's the same thing. Do I make that switch? And the same thing with doctors. Doctors don't want new. Doctors don't want new. They say they want new, but what they want is the same and better. Think about that for a second, right? They want a cephalosporin with an expanded spectrum of coverage with less GI upset. Yeah. But if I give them a a gyrase inhibitor that works in the nucleus to suppress super uncoiling of DNA and kill the bacteria, whoa, that's a little weird. Well, that's a quinolone, so that's nothing new. But again, physicians like the same but better, and that's just a function of clinical practice, right? They don't want to hurt their patients. And let me come full circle to that idea of the car, because when I buy a car, what's the worst thing that could happen? I don't like it and I sell it. All right, maybe I lose some money, right? Okay, but if I'm sick, if I have a chronic condition, if I have a child with a condition, or I have cancer, I've got cystic fibrosis, or I've got something that's difficult to manage that has significant morbidity and mortality, then those choices are not, oh, well, I'll just change my mind in 6 months. I'll just sell the car and buy something else. So obviously there's so much more psychological baggage. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to shift gears. You started to talk about, we started to shift gears from patients to physicians. And this was an interesting point, on our prep call. And I love this, how, physicians, especially, so much burnout. And the title of our webinar is Technology Being a Partner in Care.
Right.
Which means that now we're going to look at technology doing the cognitive heavy lifting for doctors.
Yeah.
So what's your take on that?
Let's go through this systematically, and I'm really going to get myself in trouble now.
Good.
When I look at people who are burned out, I see waitresses, I see moms with 2 jobs. I struggle with physician burnout in the context of society that we live in today. Yes, doctors work hard, but I think that, look at the top 10 wage earners in the United States today. Who makes the most money as a profession? I'm not talking about isolated CEOs. Top 10 are doctors. Doctor. The average income of a physician today, I think, is about $260,000. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, they work hard. Yes, there is burnout. But when I think about burnout, I think about that truck driver, who's pulling double shifts. I think of people with 2 and 3 jobs. So I think that that's a very complex social decision, because medicine is so close to us, and because physicians are so high in the hierarchy that they get a fair amount of light shined in their direction. So I know I'm going to take a lot of heat from that, but I want to say it. Now, here's the question. Who's the smartest person in the room? The doctor, right? You're in your bed, right? And the respiratory therapist is in your room. And maybe you've got a relative in the room, and then the oncologist, or maybe it's the chief of medicine who's rounding, and the patient sits up a little bit better, right?
The doctor walks in. Absolutely.
Right, the boss doctor. I'm not even talking about the doctor. I'm talking about, the specialist. And boy, everybody pays attention. Okay. Now that's pretty much true for the most part. That clinicians, offer the probably the highest level of acumen in a given clinical construct. But today's world is changing. The number of clinical trials, the number of published papers, the number of individual patient data. I just think about things like genomic analysis and all sorts of wacky stuff. It's physically impossible for a physician to assimilate that information into the workflow. It's just physically impossible.
I agree. I can't imagine. It's tons of data.
And remember, half of physicians are below average, right? I mean, we can't say that, that physicians are all superhuman geniuses. They're not. They're regular people. And so for me, I think that technology has to be inculcated into clinical practice, because in the final analysis, the smartest person in the room is the computer. Now, that's another thing that really gets people crazy, because we have that ability. Now, do I need to remember what the difference between the orbicularis oris and orbicularis oculi is? I don't know. I mean, do I need to have all of that sort of cognitive heavy lifting when I can provide new levels of patient engagement that might have an emotional component to it, that might take into effect social determinants of health? I mean, when I'm doing a differential diagnosis, or I'm talking to a patient in a hospital room, or even in an office, do I ask what their zip code is? Do I want to know what their socioeconomic background is and how they plan to care? One of the biggest prognostic indicators of how well you do or how well you live in life is not your HDL, it's your zip code. So how can we integrate all these factors into a more dynamic, comprehensive aspect of care? We used to talk about integrated medicine and, having members of the team, right? Remember, it used to be, we're no longer to treat the cancer patient with the doctor and the patient. We're going to bring in the spouse. We're going to bring in the psychiatrist. We're going to bring in the social worker. We're going to bring in all these factors, right? To me, what deserves a seat at the table now is technology itself, and in ways that are profound. I mean, think of the time an oncologist spends with you talking about your condition, right? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, sometimes even longer. What happens to that data? What happens to those wonderful linguistic bits and bytes? They evaporate. They disappear. Yeah. What's left is what gets charted. And what gets charted is usually what the clinician wants to hear, not what is needed to be heard. But I think you can use all that rich linguistic analysis if we could record the history. Right. Lots of interesting ways of leveraging technology to make it much more rich, much more engaged.
Well, I wish somebody would do that, because I mean, in my advocacy work and patients, especially, all the cancer patients I work with, the first thing I tell them when you're going to an appointment is take somebody with you, because you're fighting for your life, right? I mean, you're just hearing cancer and you're just hearing, how am I going to get through this? Yet alone, the doctor telling you what you need to do, the medication you need to take, the steps you need to take. We're going to do this drug that has a name that's 5 miles long, and somebody needs to be your eyes and ears. And like you said, John, technology could be the eyes and ears for that patient. Be capturing.
hold on. There
Yeah.
are four eyes and 4 ears that we're talking about here. Okay. At least that. But what the point is that, and here, this is going back to the idea of where technology actually makes us more human. And when I say that, people flip out like, oh my God, technology is the evil dystopian overlord of our world.
Back to the fear. Yeah.
But a rate limiting factor for a good history and physical, think about this, right? They say, the textbooks say that the history and physical is the cornerstone of care, right? Listen to what your patient says, do a good physical, and you'll find out a lot of information. Well, we're limited by our ability to hear. Physicians only hear a little bit, and that applies to the linguistic component of hearing the words that you say, of understanding the intonation of your voice. You know, I mean, if I say I feel fine, if my wife says to me I feel fine, I know I'm in trouble, because that usually means she's angry. But if a patient says, I feel fine, right? But if I say I feel fine, those are interpretive. So we're relying on the physician to interpret that. Now, beyond that, other senses like hearing. I mean, hearing, if you're talking about respiratory medicine, pulmonology, cardiology, look, a 1/6 systolic ejection murmur, a very, very subtle murmur is a rumor. It's a rumor. Most of the time, maybe a cardiologist would hear it, then he or she writes it in the chart, then all of a sudden, magically, the medical student or the intern hears a 1/6 systolic ejection sound, murmur. Well, we could use technology that exists today to digitize those sounds, our sight, right? Our dexterity, our ability to use 60639 silk with a P3 cutting needle to close a wound is not as good as what technology offers today. So I think that technology makes clinicians human, and we have to integrate that into care.
Well, I want to jump off on that element of tech humanizing care and as you said, this interpretive notion. So a couple terms, everybody's heard of IQ, intelligence quotient. Now we're hearing about TQ, technology quotient, but let's talk about EQ, which is empathy quotient, and wrapping this technology around it. How can EQ, empathy quotient, improve outcomes in healthcare?
Wait, my term is TQ. I'm a technology quotient guy. So I struggle with empathy. I'm not an empathic guy. So you're turning that question around on its head.
But I think you are. You are.
I don't want a doctor to hold my hand. I don't want the doctor to hold my hand. I want the guy to be the smartest guy, person, gal, whatever the appropriate, gender neutral pronoun is today. And when my child has cancer, what do I want?
A cure.
I want the most aggressive intervention. Now that I want that delivered appropriately, right? I want it delivered, but really the hierarchy of care is around optimizing the outcome. That's what I think.
Right.
So we've kind of developed this whole notion of empathy as a flip side to the TQ. We want our doctor to be smart, right?
Right.
But we want our doctor to be compassionate. And I don't know, I
think those can coexist? Can being the smartest person in the room and the most compassionate person in the room?
But why? Like, why? I mean, to me, it's a force fit. So I want, okay, here's another one. I want my doctors to be dressed nice. I want their lab coat to be monogrammed with their, so in other words, yes, it can.
Right. But I'll tell you, my surgeon who did my big surgery, he is super smart. I feel like he's the smartest guy in the room. And he was very caring. I'll never forget my pre-op. We sat down and he drew me a picture of exactly what he was going to do. So I was scared to death. Okay. I was scared, crapless. I won't swear. And he drew me a picture of how he was going to resect my rectum, take out the tumor, and exactly what was going to happen. That helped me feel better. And then he told me, Stacy, I do this all day, every day. I do, X number of the week.
Right.
This is what I do. So he instilled that confidence, that he was going to go in and get this cancer and we were going to move forward. But the elements of empathy that are important to me. He made eye contact with me. He leaned forward. He was interested in me. I was,
but that was that was only as good as his technical competence. All right. He could draw you a really nice diagram, and he could hold your hand and he could look into your eyes and say, you know what? Let me tell you something. I do this day in and day out. Right. Yeah. And do a crappy job. And what would you think of that doctor? What would you think of him?
Well,
right. Well, so it doesn't matter. That's a secondary element, but you're lumping the two together.
Yeah, but okay, so let's say he was the smartest person in the room, but he was the jerk. Okay. Right. And he didn't draw, and everything. I probably still would have left. I probably still would have gone in search of the unicorn. So you would have settled for a lesser outcome because you wanted someone to be nice to you. That's what you're saying to me. That's you're framing it up. You're saying that I'd like to take this pill because it tastes good, but it doesn't work as well, right? I like the fizzy pill. But you know me. I want it all. I want the pill that's going to work the best and taste the best. I want the surgeon that's going to be nice and the. But that's
you know what, Stacey, that's bullshit. That's Bob. Okay, that's bundle of benefits. I want it all. It's not a practical construct. Okay, it's not. You want it all. What do you want? You want to be rich. You want to be beautiful. You want to be skinny. You want to have a Rolls Royce. You want it all, right?
Well, I don't want the Rolls Royce, but I probably want
whatever, right?
Yeah, aforementioned.
But I think that in today's world, I think that you have to be very careful about that because you're not going to get it all. You're not gonna get it all.
And to your point, all my patients that talk to me, they do come in and they say, oh, my surgeon came in, he was arrogant, he was a jerk, he was an egotistical. And I said, that's what you want in a surgeon. You want the person that's going to go in.
You know what you want? What do you want? And again, I see the comments coming in about the role of trust and the value of the personal relationship. I'm not trying to downplay that, right?
Yeah.
But 10 years from now, I saw you were in the office. You were dressed up like a elf, right?
An elf. That was
right. What you say about that doctor, 5-10 years, when you get to the marker of cancer-free kind of thing, you say this, and everybody says the same thing. It's the most powerful thing you can possibly say. She saved my life, right? She saved my life. And I think that is the most important determinant. The Kaplan-Meier curve is survival. And I got to tell you, I don't think that empathy changes survival. There, I said it.
I'm going to give you that.
Heaven help me.
I'm going to give you that. I'm going to give you that. And I see where you're going with that. I'm going to with that statement, I'm going to put a bow on that, and we're going to shift gears to something I am just excited to dive into with you. And I love this. So everybody's walking around talking about patient centricity. Everybody patient centric, we're patient centric and everything. But your term, John, is we need to be patient infused.
Right.
Okay. Not patient centric. Talk to me about the different, why you're down on patient centricity. What's the difference? Why we need to be patient infused. Talk to me.
To a certain degree, it becomes an argument of semantics. And I recognize that, that people have different kind of worldviews. But particularly in the context of pharma, when we talk about big pharma, everybody in pharma has the same tagline, has the same mantra. Every CEO stands up on the podium and says, everything we do for the patient.
Right.
And he or she does it in a very reverent way, and very emotional, and take the tear out of your eye. And we believe in the patient, the power of that. And I got to tell you, how many social scientists does Pfizer employ? Take a guess. I bet you 0, but I don't know, right? But I don't think
0. I just wanted to be respectful.
I don't think they have. I don't even know how many social scientists or psychologists they have working, in their groups. There are probably a few, but I think that what happens is a lot of interesting factors going on today. Consumer centricity is not wrong. We learned that from companies like Apple and Amazon, where they really catered to the consumer, where there was, the opportunity to go to different places. But my experience drove my purchasing decision, and that was largely when the decision was subjective. Coke, Pepsi. Right. Well, I kind of like that Michael Jackson commercial. I liked the Madonna thing, so my brand loyalty is going to shift that way. So customer centricity is important. Pharma picked it up. They said that we are all about the patient. And I would argue that I don't think pharma is all about the patient. Two points I want to make here. One is, if they want to go down that road, they're going to fail, because they'll never be as good as Apple. They'll never be as good as Amazon. They'll never be good as Procter & Gamble. They're not consumer marketing organizations. That's not what they do. What does pharma do? Pharma owns the science.
I was going to say,
pharma is CRISPR. Pharma is immuno-oncology.
Right.
Pharma is genomics. That's the playground where they play. And if they want to become famous, if they want to be respected, if they want kids out of college to say, you know where I want to work? I want to work at Genentech. I want to work at these places where I'm saving lives and I'm use science to advance human longevity and cure diseases and impact COVID. I don't know why pharma feels the need to be apologetic. And while they apologize on one side of their mouth, they're saying everything we do for the patient. I don't believe that. I think that they are science-centric. And of course they're patient-infused, right? The patient dynamic is integral to care, but that's not what they do. They make drugs, they make cures. And the cures are not always driven by absolute fundamental patient need. They're driven by serendipity. They stumble over a drug that has an interesting product, interesting effect. So I just think that number one, and I'll shut up, is that patient centricity is generic and undifferentiated. Every pharma company says the same thing, okay? It also negates what they do best. It's kind of like saying, well, Tiger Woods, let's see, what's he known for? He's the best father in the world, right? Because he just played golf with his son and they won second place. They didn't win, but he's the best. No, he's not the best father. He's a golfer.
Right.
And that's what pharma is. Pharma is a science-based construct. And I think that's what differentiates them.
Right. But back to our earlier point, they definitely need, you can argue patient centricity, patient infusion, et cetera, to understand what is being asked of the patient. So if a drug regimen has a certain way of taking a drug, or tolerance for a drug, or how it's going to be absorbed in the system, all these things that a patient has to look out for to know if a drug is effective, the patient has to understand what's being asked of them with that particular drug plan, whether it's adherence or compliance. Compliance is key. So that comes back to patient centricity.
But that's not patient centricity. It's a user experience. It's a user experience. Okay. It's how do you take the drug? What are the side effects? Those are part and parcel of the process, but the magic of pharmaceutical science is killing the damn tumor.
Absolutely. No doubt. But again, if a patient doesn't understand that they're going to have XYZ side effects with this drug, and they stop taking the drug because nobody ever told them, hey, expect a rash on your face, expect this, expect fluid retention or whatever it is. And if they only knew that that was a regular part of the drug and they would stick with the drug, their tumor, possibly would be cured. So that's what I'm saying. There has to be a certain meat in the middle here, education component, whether you want to call it patient infusion, patient centricity, of educating the patient on what they need to know about that drug
so
to cure the tumor. That's what I'm
so
saying.
if I don't plug my Tesla in at night and charge the battery, it won't run. Okay. So is Tesla about consumer engagement? Is that what Tesla is known for? Their consumer engagement? No, they're known for electric cars.
Right.
How you use it, that's the instruction manual, right? That the instruction manual of a pill is a little bit harder, and there are humanistic components to it, but that's not what pharma is about. That's a peripheral component. That's why it's patient infused, but not patient centric. I think it's a very easy thing to say patient centricity. It feels good. It feels good, and no one ever gives you a hard time about that. All these CEOs, they say it, and people kiss their ass about it.
It gets on my nerves. I tweeted about it. It gets on my nerves. Yeah, I prefer patient-driven care, but I'm a little biased.
But it's not patient-driven care. That's a patient thing. Pharma is a science-based construct. Pharma is using high science and bench scientists to find ways of managing disease. That's what pharma does best. That's why we should love pharma and appreciate pharma. You know,
pharma
I mean,
saved my life. Pharma saved my life.
Right. And they did it by being nice to you. They did it by explaining directions to you. Well, how did pharma save your life? By giving you a drug, a therapeutic intervention.
They didn't. I had to do all my own research on those drugs. Yeah, but again, if I didn't, I would have probably dropped off those drugs because I wouldn't have known what to expect with the nausea, with constipation. So anyhow,
but is that the responsibility of pharma, or is that the responsibility of your clinician? You know,
I would say both.
Okay.
I would say both. I would absolutely say both. And I think that we could be doing more. But let's tie this. We're talking a lot about pharma. John, talk to me about technology with regard to patient-infused care. Tell me what that looks like. What devices, what trends, what's happening with technology to enable patient-infused care? Talk to me about that.
Well, a classic example here is telemedicine. And you know, telemedicine was born in March of 2020. And that's when the COVID pandemic took a foothold. And telemedicine was born out of necessity and not desire, because I couldn't get to the doctor. So what am I going to do? So what happened is there was a spike in telemedicine visits, hospital-based, different kinds of telemedicine engagements. And the interesting thing to me is it's gone down. It's actually gone down in some instances back to baseline. So yeah, but did
that surprise anybody, really?
Well, but people are talking about the telemedicine explosion. It's not. It's actually the telemedicine experiment that in some degrees failed. I've said that telemedicine is not at an inflection point. Telemedicine is at a tipping point, because it can go up or it can go down.
Why do you think it failed?
Well, I think that let's talk about Steve Jobs. Everybody likes to talk about Steve Jobs because, you know, they find that sort of that level of technological genius. So Steve Jobs says that when the first television show came online, it was nothing except a radio show with a TV camera. In other words, they still had the people standing on stage talking into a microphone, except they put a camera in front of them. And so that didn't advance the TV show. In fact, it took the radio show and actually corrupted it a little bit, because what happened with the radio show is now I could actually see what's happening. So I lost the magic of my imagination by watching these actors stand in front of a microphone and pretend to act. Right. So ultimately, what happened with television is that it evolved and it became a more robust experience. The same thing happened with the internet. The early days of the internet, all we did is take our picture from our glossy brochure and put it online and type in the headline. That was it. It wasn't a very good experience. But then what happened is we realized that there's something called the user experience. And that began to change the game. Now, here's what's happening with telemedicine. Telemedicine is like the early days of that radio show. It's a Zoom call. You know, telemedicine is no different than a phone call the doctor made with my mom 50 years ago when I was a little baby and I had an earache.
Agree.
Right? Pick up the phone. The doctor says, well, does the ear hurt? Pull on it. Yeah. Does that hurt? Does he scream? Yeah. I'll call the pharmacy and give you some amoxicillin or whatever they were using. Maybe even tetracycline that would stain your teeth. So that's where we are with telemedicine. Telemedicine was a force fit. It's a clinical visit on a Zoom call, but we don't leverage any of the existing technologies, which I think is real interesting. So we don't, we don't use a stethoscope to listen. We don't use an EKG machine. These things are currently available. So I think there's a real disconnect. So what we're doing, I believe that the telemedicine visit can actually be better than the office visit.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because a lot of people say, well, if only it could be as good as. Yeah. Right? I think the office visit is a horrible thing.
Well, I mean, I sit on a board I talk about this all the time. And I think that telemedicine is a great option. I mean, I always cite the example when
I think it's the best option. I know you're not going to agree.
Well, I mean, I had shingles this year. Okay. So I'm a stage 4 cancer survivor, as we know. I had shingles. I had this awful pain, this internal pain. I hadn't had the rash yet. So I had a GI cancer. So what am I thinking? It's a recurrence. So the last thing that I want to do is do a telemedicine visit. My anxiety's through the roof. I ran into the office for a face-to-face visit, Now I did my follow-up via telehealth, but when I was having that acute pain and I was freaking out and I didn't know what it was, I really wanted to go in and see my oncologist and then ultimately my PCP.
But you wanted to, right?
Right.
Are you the arbiter of optimal care? I mean, it's interesting what you want. If I let my mom drive medical engagement by what she wants, it would all go to hell in a handbasket. So your personal desire to go to the doctor because you had what turned out to be shingles and you felt that it was a recurrence, you wanted that, not your doctor. But don't I know my own body from my lived experience? No. Why would you know your own body?
What?
Why would you know your own body? What's your
Because
sodium level? What's your sodium level now? Tell me what it is.
I could look at my patient portal and tell you.
No, you don't know what it is now.
Give me a minute.
But you don't know what it is, right? What's your blood pressure? What's your pulse? You know your own body. I think that your consciousness, Stacy, 1/1 millionth of the sensory input of your body, 1/1 millionth makes its way to consciousness. You are conscious of 1/1 millionth of the physiology that's going on in your body. So for you to say that you know your body, I think is not only wrong, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. That's technology. Now, wait, let me finish, okay? Because you talk about this telemedicine visit. I look at telemedicine, okay? Everybody looks at telemedicine as an alternate to the office visit, okay?
Right.
In other words,
it's an option.
But telemedicine is different because it is not this sort of isolated, punctuated thing. In other words, an office visit is on, off. I walk into the doctor's office. No, worse than that is I spend half hour driving there, right? So I waste my time there. Then I sit in the office with other sick people breathing in air I don't want to breathe in,
Gross.
Right. Then I go sit in the exam room and I wait another 20 minutes and then I see the doctor for 5 minutes. Okay. Then the switch is on, right? And then the switch is off. Then I go away, right? I think that the reality of telemedicine is ongoing, continuous care.
Yes,
ongoing. That's why it's better. I don't want occasion. I don't want to see my doctor every 6 months. I want to see my doctor every day, every minute of the day. I want a continuous interface. That's the essence of technology-empowered care. The office visit is old. The office visit is boring. The office visit is broken.
Yes,
agree. And all the office visit, the only thing the office visit does is allow the physician to act as king, right? You're going to the court of the physician where you bow down before her holiness. We don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. In fact, physicians are reluctant to embrace telemedicine, while patients are much more
Yes.
Forward thinking and adopting this care. You know, it's easier for the doctor because they all got stuff. They got their chair, they got their office, they have their nurse who gets their coffee. It's all, you know, it's all built around the doctor. It's, you know what it is? It's physician-centric care. That's where we are. You want something really interesting? We are about physician-centric care, and patients are sort of the empowerment. They're the enabler. The patient is the enabler of physician-centric care. And it's about time they stand up and say no.
We're trying. We're trying. We are trying. Couple things I want to wrap up with here before we go take some questions.
And I want to go back to T. I want to go back to T because I think we missed that a little bit. Just for a minute.
Technology quotient?
Yeah, I think that's really, we know we want our kids to grow up to be smart, right? TQ. We want our kids to grow up to be empathic. That's true. Of course, absolutely, right? But I also believe that our ability to assimilate technology into our lives is equally as important, our technology quotient. And the formula for success today is IQ plus EQ plus TQ. If you're a diabetic, if you're a type 1 diabetic and you integrate technology into your care, continuous blood glucose monitoring, right? AI-based glucose and insulin analysis to optimize insulin administration, that TQ is essential to your care. If you're a teacher today and you can't use Zoom, wow, right? If you're a doctor and don't understand genomics or sophisticated aspects of, you know, of technology, you're in trouble. So those three things are important. I think it's very important that we recognize, and just to come full circle, I don't think that your IQ changes over time. My really smart friends in high school are really smart today. And the ones who aren't so smart, well, they're not so smart today. So I don't think TQ changes. EQ, I think that EQ maybe has a little bit more bandwidth, but I think that, and I'll use this expression, and I know I'm going to get in trouble, but the granola heads in high school are the granola heads today. They were empathic. They had a humanistic aspect of their lives, and they stayed that way.
Yeah.
The ones who weren't aren't. Now, so those don't change. So are we going to change IQ? Are we going to change EQ? No. Okay. But TQ, our ability to integrate technology, can actually make us smarter, can make us functionally smarter. How fascinating is that? So the path to IQ might be through TQ. Now, I also think that EQ, our empathy, is in part mediated by technology because I never get to meet people like you. Social media, and how do we engage that collective reality through technology? So it's not always dystopian and negative. So the TQ is not just an afterthought. It's part of that triad of human achievement.
I agree. I love it all. I love it all. And I just to swing back even more, I think the adoption of that TQ and flexing that muscle, building that muscle, comes through education and training and teaching and helping somebody understand more. And that's how we can build that muscle. That's, you know, I'm going to go to questions here and I'm going to search the questions on this final. Obviously, it's the end of the year. Everybody's coming with predictions, John. Everybody's, you know, trying to, you know, this is my thing that I'm putting out into the universe. 2020 was the year of the problem. 2021 was the year of the prelect. In other words, everybody talked about what the problem was. I want 2022 to be the year of the process. And what are we going to do? We're going to galvanize, we're going to mobilize. What are we going to do? So, John, the question is, what are you, let's talk about maybe 3 things that you have your eye on for 2022, maybe key trends, things to watch from Nostalab. What are the 3 things you have your eye on for 2022 in technology?
I'll do the stuff first, and then I'll do the philosophical relationship. So to me, I think that data and data analytics are at the cornerstone of everything that's going to happen. I think that our ability to manage COVID was largely a function of our ability to test. Testing has failed. We do not have enough tests. We haven't been testing adequately. And so that's been a big problem. Data, we're a data-driven society. I've often said that data is the third window into humanity, that there was the telescope and there was the microscope, and there's big data and analytics. It's going to show us such interesting things, and it's going to put together pieces that we didn't think fit. And this, we talked about this a little while ago, is the idea of 6 degrees of separation and Kevin Bacon. You know, everybody's connected to Kevin Bacon by 5 people.
Right.
You know, well, I think that we can probably find some very insightful clinical parameter by connecting 3 things or 4 things or 2 things. And that's what big data finds. They show us what is seen, but not realized, or something that we don't even look for. So the ability to process data and find new things is going to be very, very important. Here's another example. When you get your blood test, okay, they test for what they're looking for, right? But what about all the other things that could be looked at? I'll give you an example of a chest x-ray. When you do a chest x-ray, you do a CT scan of the chest, you can actually do an associated calcium score to look for coronary artery disease. We don't do it. We just don't do it because nobody cares. When we do a chest x-ray, we could actually measure, using analytics and AI, the vertebrae. So, you know, if it's a 50-year-old woman who's got pneumonia and she goes and gets a chest x-ray, you automatically look at her vertebrae to look for sizing, because that's going to tell you if she has osteoporosis. We're going to find what we didn't even look for. We throw away data. You know, we talk about recycling. We recycle plastic. Why can't we recycle data, or at least use data more efficiently? Because, you know, all the blood that's probably drawn out of your body, it's gallons, you know? So I think we can use that in very interesting ways. So data analytics is really where I think is very, very, very important. The other thing is a philosophical thing, and it's agility. We have to recognize that we were wrong a lot of times, that some of the best paths forward, particularly the issue around COVID, the decisions were not that good, but they have a certain inertia. You know, clinical inertia it can be a terrible thing. The way a doctor is trained, the way the doctor learned, if I'm going to stage your cancer, I've got to use a CAT scan. That's the way I was trained. That's the way the data is. But well, maybe now I can use low cost tomosynthesis, tomography, that is inexpensive and close to my house. But you know what? I don't know. I'm not going to do it. So we have to be agile. We have to recognize that things are going to change. It doesn't mean be stupid. It doesn't mean change whimsically. And that's the struggle. But I think agility in today's world, particularly look at Omicron and COVID. You know, we have to be agile in terms of managing that. You know, right now we're stuck in a vaccine-centric world, because that's what the government told us, and every solution is about the vaccine, when in fact we have other therapeutic modalities that have to be looked at collectively. So agility is my word for 2022.
Oh, I love that, agility. Talk to me about real quick, something you said in our prep call that you wanted to watch was the availability of imaging. And how that was going to really change the landscape. We talk about the quality of imaging, but in your mind, it was, you know, more access or more availability of imaging.
I mean, I'm working with a company called Nanox, N-A-N-O-X. So that's a matter of disclosure. But the interesting thing is that 2/3 of people around the world don't have access to imaging.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you're a patient with cancer, right? Staging and imaging is essential, right? You literally live and die by that scan.
You absolutely do. It's called scanxiety. Yes.
And it's horrible. And for a lot of people, they just don't have the ability to get to the scan. For initial diagnosis, it's unavailable. So what I think that we will begin to potentially see is, and it's a really cool idea. It takes the X-ray tube and it digitizes it. So right now, the X-ray is it's a device that heats up. When you look at a CAT scanner, those tubes get hot, and they actually have to move them because they'll burn out. And it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars just to maintain these complex machines that do these imaging. And what's happening, at least with respect to imaging, is that the role of AI, because AI is all about image detection, right? It looks at images, it looks at pattern detection. That's really one of the golden opportunities. And now we're looking at the ability to generate images in radiology. Look, the phone did something magical, right? It digitized the camera. Remember those big clunky single reflex cameras used to carry around, those big Nikon and Minolta and Canon? They were huge, right? Now I have it right here. What happened was the camera was digitized, right? Digitization. And in part, that's what we're seeing here, the digitization of the X-ray source, not the X-ray. X-rays are already digitized, the X-ray source. Digitization leads to dematerialization. It's small, right? My Nikon F1 camera is this.
Yeah.
Right? Dematerialization leads to demonetization. It's inexpensive. My $1,000 Nikon camera is cheap. Dematerialization and demonetization leads to the other big $50,000 word in medicine today, and that's democratization. Once we bring care to people, and that's what I'm seeing is very interesting, is that once we bring care. Now, bringing imaging and diagnostic ability to people in sub-Saharan Africa is great, but then what do you do? How do you treat that colon cancer? How do you treat that mass in the lung, that spot on the lung? It goes into this context of telemedicine and telecare, because care at a distance is the new dynamic, and so I'll stop there. I'm trying to eyeball. One eye is looking at the questions and one eye is looking at you.
Me too.
So.
And I know we're running out of time, but Whitney Jones is a friend, and I want to end. I have great respect for physicians. So I want to sort of wrap on a question from a physician. As much as a problem as patient communication and adoption is critical, how are we going to onboard physicians who have limited bandwidth in areas such as genomics, molecular diagnostics, cancer family genetic testing, and new pharmacologic tools? I love that question.
That's a great question. So first of all, let me say that I love medicine and I love science, and physicians are wonderful people. It's my job to push the boundaries a little bit. So I have to qualify. All my answers is that I want to push the dialogue forward. Right. So when I say the computer is going to replace the doctor, I mean it, but I don't mean it. It is a bit of hyperbole, but I think we have to push out of the comfort zone of medicine. It's that comfort zone. And that question is great, because that is the fundamental issue that faces mankind today in medicine. The information coming in and our ability to assimilate that information, our cognitive processes don't meet. Just the reality is that I can't read 8,000 publications a month on oncology, right? I can't read the 1,800 on breast cancer if I specialize in breast cancer. I can't do it. So it's not a trick. It's not some learning skill. The only solution forward is technology. We have to partner with technology. And that frightens people, as we said earlier on. But I think that if we could, go to the eye doctor, okay, and get a pair of glasses, what happens now versus 30, 40 years ago? 30, 40 years ago, I'd go better, worse, better, worse, better, worse, right? We'd go through all those different things. Now I stick my head in the machine and it spits out my prescription. Technology gives the optometrist my prescription. Now there's a little bit of fine tuning, but I understand that's not even necessary in many instances. So the optometrist trusts the technology, but what does the optometrist get to do? The optometrist gets to talk with me, gets to ask me about, John, when you drive at night, are you bothered by the glare of other headlights? During the day, so we begin to build a relationship that does what? That improves care. It improves care because it humanizes care, but it allows technology to do what tech does. So, let technology read the EKG, let technology read the mammogram for 87% of the cases. And when you have to look at it, you can look at it. Now, the doctor might find herself, instead of only having 5 minutes with my Aunt Rose, to have 15 minutes with my Aunt Rose. And you know what? She's going to hate it. Because we know that yappy patient, as much as it's nice, it's superfluous. And I've got other things that I need to do. So there are two tragedies in life in clinical medicine. One is not getting what you want, and the other is getting it because my Aunt Rose looms out there in the distance.
Well, we're going to wrap here and we're going to just send good thoughts to Aunt Rose and John. I just want to thank you so much for
My pleasure.
being my guest today. This was just a great dialogue and robust conversation. To our audience, thank you for joining us. John has a brand new paper out on telemedicine, his thoughts. I encourage you to read it and how we can improve upon telemedicine. Please visit his website, nostalab.com, and please visit osplabs.com for finding some solutions in healthcare technology. And I appreciate everybody watching.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holiday. That's right. Right on. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Talk to you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.